You understand nothing. You have no life experience. You live in a bubble. Just shut up. Just stop coming out and trying to tell us, what this means. If you don't understand what this means, only I, a 20-something overweight college girl with 8 cats, can tell you what these things mean, because I just absorbed what my gender studies professor pried open my skull and poured in there.
There's a lot of talk going around about the X-Men, about how they've always been woke. They were woke from day one. They've been woke now, and all the fucking neckbeards out there need to understand that the X-Men have been, I guess, appropriated by white chicks with pronouns who are now apparently, Aaron, the most discriminated against minority in the world? Is that how you understand it?
There's nothing like 20-something white college girls. They're the most oppressed people in all of history, and they alone can stand up for every other marginalized group and tell them what's what.
Do you think they realize that they culturally appropriated the word woke from black folks?
I mean, I don't think that cultural appropriation is a thing, but going by their belief system, yeah, absolutely they did.
They absolutely stole it from them.
They did what they always do. They made it about them. Every single problem. You can always count on some college-age white women to come in and make it about themselves. It's unbelievable. They're the worst people on the planet.
An amazing article on the Mary Sue breaking this out and essentially putting you and I in our places. But I do want to read the bio of the person first, because the bio of the author is always the best part of a Mary Sue article. Rachel Leishman, she, her, is an assistant editor at the Mary Sue. She's been a writer professionally since 2016, but was always obsessed with movies and television and writing about them growing up. A lover of Spider-Man and Wanda Maximoff's biggest defender, she has interest in all things nerdy and a cat named Benjamin Wyatt the cat. If you want to talk classic rock music or all things Harrison Ford, she's your girl, but her interests span far and wide. Yes, she knows she looks like Florence Pugh.
That's a bold claim. It's a
Dude, did you know I look like Brad Pitt?
Yeah, hey, yes, I know. I know that I look like, I don't know, who do I look like? Who should I
You look like Harry Styles, isn't he?
Yeah, there you go. I look like Harry Styles. Although yes, I know that.
Weird thing with modern celebrities where the guys dress up like girls all the time.
Oh, what do they call that? Like the baby doll or something? Baby girl.
Are you into the baby girl movement instead of
I saw
masculinity?
No, I'd rather. I'm talking.
That headline let me know that Pedro Pascal, the wrong guy for Fantastic Four. He was not wearing those pumps right.
If he's going to be dominated by Invisible Woman in the film, if it's going to be another MCU film, then he's the perfect person.
Might as well put him in a skirt, right?
Yeah, you might as well.
That was one of the most ridiculous articles. That could have been a video unto itself, Aaron. But I hope you are ready to be put in your place, because Rachel has the goods here, Aaron. Let us look back at what comics legend Chris Claremont said about the X-Men in 1982. The X-Men are hated, feared, and despised collectively by humanity for no other reason than that they are mutants. So what we have here, intended or not, is a book that is about racism, bigotry, and prejudice. This makes sense since Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were inspired by the civil rights movement to create superheroes.
This is not the genesis of X-Men. The genesis of X-Men was the fact that they didn't want to come up with origins for every character every time. So they're like, what's a simple out? Oh, we'll make them mutants. And then, and a lot of the stuff came later, when they kind of realized that there were some allegories for the civil rights movement. Some of that came in. And especially once people started talking about it, Stan is just a brilliant carnival barker of, changing his own history and adding things in. And, when people praise certain things about the characters that maybe weren't intended, he will certainly adopt that into the story. So that's kind of like what the X-Men became. So no, they weren't created outright as a civil rights allegory. That a lot of that came later.
In fact, this is what Stan Lee had to say in the X-Men official guide. Guaranteed I'd never have to worry about the origin of a superpower again. It hit me when I thought of the word mutant. We all know that mutations occur in nature. For no apparent reason, a frog will be born with 3 legs, or a banana will be the size of a watermelon, or a child prodigy will have the ability to play Mozart at the age of 3. And the beautiful things about such mutations is they don't require an explanation. They can happen to anyone. But there are multiple interviews with Stan Lee where he basically parrots that. There are multiple interviews where Jack Kirby explains why he created the X-Men and how he created the X-Men, and he never ever mentions the civil rights movement.
No, not at all. And obviously these were men who thought about these things because, of course, the Black Panther was kind of created in that vein, and they definitely incorporated certain social movements of the day into their comics, things that they believed in, and especially as two Jewish men, they knew what it was like to be persecuted, and they obviously knew what the dangers of persecution are out there. They had seen the Holocaust, so obviously, there were some things that went into that, and I think there's two Jewish leaders that they kind of modeled Xavier and Magneto on. People like to say like, oh, they were modeled on Dr. King and on Malcolm X. And it's like, yeah, well, some of that came later, and a lot of that came with Claremont, where those comparisons were kind of made. But originally there was two Jewish leaders that they kind of based Xavier and Magneto's conflict on. So, all of this stemmed from them being Jewish men, which, people like Rachel Leishman, I'm sure she's out there, screaming about Gaza on her Twitter. She probably not too fond of Jewish men, but unfortunately that's where all this came from, for you, Rachel. I hate to tell you, but all of these icons were created by Jewish comic creators back in the early 60s
that had a lot of life experience. At this point, when they created the X-Men, they both would have went out and fought for their country in World War II, obviously fighting the real Nazis, actual Nazi fighters themselves. And if you go back and read the original incarnation of X-Men, before it became Uncanny X-Men, and what certainly wasn't a big hit right off the bat from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it's just a superhero team book. They go out there and they do superhero stuff. And that's basically what they do for the most part, even through Claremont's run, especially the early parts. It doesn't really change. The tenor of X-Men doesn't really change. And certainly it does change over time. But really until God Loves, Man Kills happens.
Yeah, it doesn't really become, there's always like that element of, well, we're mistrusted, but a lot of it stems from the fact that they've got these crazy powers, and characters like Magneto are out there committing terrorist acts, so that's looking bad for all mutants. And it always kind of like, even when I first got into reading it, it was always kind of there's always a disconnect between the regular Marvel universe and then the X-Men books, because it's like, okay, well, everybody hates and fears mutants, but Spider-Man doesn't get called a mutant in his book. People don't throw things at him. Like, how do they even know what the difference is? Like, I don't think he had an ad campaign that was like, hey guys, not a mutant, bit by a radioactive spider. That's how I got my powers. And everybody's like, oh, well, that's okay. We're fine with that. It's one of those things that came into the book. It made the book more interesting. It gave it more layers. It gave you more story potential to jump off from. But sometimes they just went into space and they fought the Shi'ar.
Well, and unfortunately, once God Loves, Man Kills happens and that idea gets in people's heads, basically that's what the X-Men do become about, especially in the early 2000s up to kind of where we are now. But that's basically like the dark years of X-Men. It's even less popular at this point in time than it was when Stan and Jack were on the book, where they basically made it a reprint comic book, because it just kind of killed the idea. It's supposed to be a superhero team-up book. Obviously, they have their own unique things that they have to overcome, but it's also something that essentially anybody that ever felt like an outcast, anybody that ever felt like an oddball, maybe anybody that didn't feel like they belonged to the group or whatever, which is essentially every single person on the planet that you could relate to and you could kind of get into. And once they cut that off from the series to where everybody could relate to it, those are kind of the points when people stop really reading it as much.
Yeah, well, it used to be a book for anybody because it was a broad kind of metaphor. So anybody could come in and identify with some of the characters and identify with their struggle and with the way that they felt and the feeling of being an outcast. That's something that everybody can identify with. And now it's a book that is ultimately for nobody except for Jordan White and his collection of doofuses. That's why the sales.
Well, now it's not even a civil rights allegory. It's just about the LGBTQ community.
It's just Kink Fetish Island. And I'm sure as we move into this new relaunch, I'm sure that Marvel is not going to pivot away from that. I don't think Tom Brevoort has the guts to pivot away from that and to try to restore the X-Men to what it was when it was a sales juggernaut. But, we'll see, I guess.
Well, it's time for Rachel to school you some more, you stupid neckbeard. The point is that the origins of the X-Men are connected to injustice and function as a metaphor for any marginalized community. So when men yell into the void angrily about inclusion and diversity, they are missing the entire fucking point of the X-Men franchise. There have been allegories to HIV/AIDS in the Marvel Comics history, amongst many more connections to complex human rights issues. What I'm trying to say is that acting like X-Men are suddenly woke is laughable. What you're telling me is that you never paid attention to the X-Men.
And I think that the way that people are using it when they say that the X-Men were never woke is that the X-Men were never pandering. The X-Men were, these were stories that were told by good storytellers who could craft subtle narratives, who could, put themes in their books that weren't heavy-handed, and now we've just got a bunch of heavy-handed activism, and that's when people are saying the X-Men were never woke. The X-Men were never so heavy-handed that you were just beat over the head with what the author was trying to say. You know, it was done in a more subtle fashion. It was done even when they were doing stuff like Days of Future Past, which is basically like the mutant Holocaust, when they actually had a villain show up in the Age of Apocalypse that was named Holocaust, which wasn't subtle. But all of these things were kind of handled with this overarching. It was just a bigger tent, and it was bigger adventure, and it wasn't boiled down to petty modern day grievances like pronouns and things, where you had to read about it in every issue. And when Iceman shows up, all he can do anymore, he doesn't save anybody. He's not interesting. All he just does come in and goes, "Hey guys, I'm gay," and says something gay, or talks about being gay, or talks about his boyfriend. So, oh, he's gay. We all know he's gay now. We all know it. Give me an Iceman who's like the Iceman of old, where he used to have a fun personality that wasn't based on one thing.
I do get the distinct impression they don't understand what people's problem with woke is. They're like, woke has always been there. Captain America's woke. X-Men's woke. And it's like, listen, nobody's opposed to the idea of punching a Nazi. Nobody's actually opposed to the idea of having female superheroes. Nobody's really opposed to the idea of having gay superheroes, or I guess even talking about HIV/AIDS if you were able to do it correctly. The reason people hate woke shit is because it's so over the top and pandering, it's not even funny. They forsake good storytelling. They forsake character development. They forsake everything for the terms of the message because they don't want to entertain people with woke entertainment. They want to teach you with woke entertainment, and nobody wants to pay money to be taught, especially when they're fucking adults.
Yeah, like, look, hey, write a story about, about marginalized people or people that feel persecuted. Give me that story. But take me on a ride. Like, tell me a story. Don't just beat me over the head with a lecture. That's what people think when they think woke, is they think, oh man, I'm just going to get this preachy, manifesto from an activist instead of an adventure story that has themes in it. Know the difference. That's what people are saying. I kind of disagree with just the strategy. This is why I don't like when you have terms like woke, or you have terms like SJW or things like that, or even words like Nazi, because they get used in such a way that they lose all meaning. So
they
now
become catch-alls.
Yeah, they just become catch-alls, and now everybody's so gun shy that if you get a thing, like I saw the other day, Storm's in a pantsuit in X-Men 97, and they're like, they're gender-bending Storm. And I'm like, I don't know that they're necessarily gender-bending Storm. I will agree that the X-Men 97 cartoon is probably going to be filled with a lot of, identity politics BS. But I don't think putting Storm in a pantsuit, which she's kind of worn before, back in the 90s, she's got a mohawk. She had that in the 80s. I don't think that's necessarily, gender-bending Storm. But maybe once you see the show and the whole context, I guess we'll find out.
I don't know about you, but what I'm the most annoyed with, it's not, I don't the woke stuff, the entertainment that is there to pander and teach me, and it's so over the top, it's like getting hit in the head with the fucking sledgehammer. I don't like any of that stuff. But the thing that really does piss me off more than anything is these stupid gender studies people that got degrees that they never should have been given because they weren't actually studying anything important. They want to go back in history, and they want to start saying, well, now from our view in 2023, we've decided or proclaimed that the X-Men was always ours, and it was woke entertainment. And they've decided to paint all these institutions and these franchises with the lens of modernity that absolutely sucks. You're missing out on the point. When you go back and you read those 60s era X-Men comic books, it's like a vault into time. It's like a time capsule where you can actually learn about what American culture was back then, instead of thinking about it in comparison to what it is now. Because I hate to break it to all these freaks and these morons, America pretty much sucks right now. This is as bad as it gets.
Yeah, it's here's the nice thing. The tables are turning, and Rachel Leishman can go out and write all of the insipid articles that she wants with her, know nothing perspective. If you go and you read her articles, they're absolutely hilarious. She's like the worst person on that site, which is saying something. But the nice thing is that we just point and laugh. That's the point of the Mary Sue. The Mary Sue converts nobody, and it speaks to nobody. And the only people that read it are people like us that go and want to read the bios and have a good laugh. Of course, I'm surprised there's only one cat mentioned in that bio.
Oh, she's got more cats than that. These are the final words of Rachel in this article, really putting us down. It feels like she's putting a bullseye twice on you and only once on me. And yet all these clowns watched X-Men 97's trailer and made comments about how they hope it's good and not woke. They've become enraged because Morph is non-binary, which makes sense given the history of the X-Men. They are so loud yet so wrong. You can own as many action figures as you want, Aaron, but if you don't understand what these characters are trying to teach you, you have wasted your breath and time posing as a fan. You are a fucking poser.
I'm so tired of these dumb gender studies idiots coming out and like telling us what the meaning of things are. You understand nothing. You have no life experience. You live in a bubble. Just shut up. Just stop coming out and trying to tell us, what this means. If you don't understand what this means, only I, a 20-something overweight college girl with 8 cats, can tell you what these things mean because I just absorbed what my gender studies professor pried open my skull and poured in there. All of these people are just people who have no life experience. All they have is received opinions from the culture, and the culture sucks right now. And when people say, I don't want X-Men to be woke, what they're really saying is, I don't want this show to be filled with a bunch of identity politics bullshit. I don't want Morph to be non-binary, even though if it is going to be somewhere, I will concede that putting it in a sci-fi setting, superhero sci-fi setting like X-Men makes more sense than in real life, because the X-Men is make-believe, just like non-binary is make-believe. Whatever you're... Oh my God, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, Wes!
They've all sided with Magneto, not realizing that he's the cautionary tale. He's not the one that you're actually supposed to emulate. He's the bad guy. You're actually supposed to be emulating Charles Xavier and his behavior and the way that he's doing it.
It's exhausting. But at the end of the day, if this is what X-Men has become, if this is what Marvel wants it to be, they own that property. They can, hire all these hacks and they can ruin the franchise and run it to the ground and make it unsellable to regular people. That's absolutely fine. I'll keep buying my action figures and I'll remember the X-Men that were, when I loved them. And you can write all this apocrypha. And I don't have to accept it. I don't have to read it. And I don't have to, celebrate it. And I'm not going to. I'm just going to move on. And that's what most of the readers have done.
Absolutely. And that's the worst part, where people just get fed up to where they don't even say anything anymore. They just decide to walk away, and then all of this stuff falls apart. And then Rachel and some of the other people at the Mary Sue actually have to get real jobs. I bet they're hoping that doesn't happen anytime soon. Now, if you would like more of this conversation, the Geek Fix is actually a 2-hour podcast every Wednesday on Thinking Critical Patreon. And Aaron and I have another hour and 20 minutes of BSing and talking about geek culture and all kinds of fun stuff that I think would upset Rachel very much. If you would like to check that out, there's a link in the video description for some more fun with Aaron, Sparrow, and Wes.